Now, we just concluded a discussion of Christianity in its wide variety of denominations here in America and around the world. However, just as Lutheranism isn't the only denomination in Christianity, so Christianity isn't the only religion in the world. If we look around the world, we see a variety of religions, some which are very large and others, many others, which are rather small. In this lesson, we're going to talk about the major world religions in existence today, and we're going to conclude by considering how they can relate to our faith in Christ and how we should respond to those who do follow other religions. So thank you for joining with us in this journey today as we explore world religions. The first religion we're going to consider is one that we're already quite familiar with from our studies of the Bible and of Jesus. Judaism began approximately 2,100 years before Christ in the person of Abraham. We remember learning about Abraham and God making his covenant with him and making promises to Abraham. And the tradition, the religion that followed, is known as Judaism. Judaism adherents, also known as Jews or the Jewish people, hold the Old Testament to be their sacred scriptures, known as the Hebrew Bible. They share many understandings of God and practices the same with Christians, except that they do not hold the validity of the New Testament and do not regard Jesus as the foretold Messiah. One of the great reservations that my Jewish friends have about Christians is that they understand Jews today to be the same as the Jews in the Bible. And while there is certainly some similarities, just as Christianity has developed over the last 2,000 years, so has Judaism developed over the last 2,000 years. And their understanding of their faith, their communal practices, have also developed and varied, just as we see also in Christianity. Important Jewish beliefs include that in God, just as Christians believe in God. They believe in the validity and the inspiration of the Holy Scriptures. But more than beliefs, they are a religion of practices. That is, their performance of their religious ceremonies, their observance of legal restrictions in their religion. These are what truly are constitutive of the Jewish religion. And many people, as there's a wide variety of beliefs and reflections even within Judaism, what unites them all is a common practice and a common history that brings all Jewish people together. Judaism is a fairly small religion with only about 15 million adherents worldwide, with approximately half living in Israel and about the same number living in North America, in the United States and Canada, with small pockets around the world. Although Judaism is a relatively small world religion, it is important in that it was the forerunner to Christianity and has so many things in common in understanding of God, in ethics, in history, with its Christian successors. Roughly 600 years after Christ, another world religion emerged on the stage. This tradition, known as Islam, follows roughly in the same tradition as Judaism and Christianity, but takes things in a somewhat different direction. In the year 610 AD, a man in the Middle East, in approximately Saudi Arabia today, began to receive what he understood as revelations from God, which he wrote down over the next 20 years and collected into a book called the Quran. He shared this news with other people around him, and it quickly spread into the major world religion that it is today, spreading west across North Africa all the way up into Spain, and east all the way across the Middle East, all the way to India. The practitioners of this new religion, Islam, are known as Muslims, and they are differentiated from Jews and Christians, whom they do treat with respect as also people of the book. They are different in that they hold this additional book, this Quran, which they hold to be the perfect revelation from God, to supersede the Bible and the Holy Scriptures. They are also characterized by several unique practices. One is their confession of believing in Allah, what the term for God alone, and they hold Muhammad to be his preeminent prophet. Muslims also have a habit of praying 5 times a day, of fasting during a month called Ramadan during the year, of taking a journey to the holy city of Mecca for them once during a lifetime, and also giving acts of charity to the poor. Islam today is the second largest world religion with approximately 1.9 billion followers, and it is also a relatively young and growing religion around the world. It is found still in the areas to which it first spread in the Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia, but also has large followers in places such as Indonesia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and communities across the Americas and even Europe. Islam is similar in some regards to Judaism and Christianity in that it is monotheistic, believing that there is one God and one God alone who created the world and who relates to people in an overall positive way. However, it is quite different in its understanding of salvation, where Christians hold that we are saved by what God has done through the person of Jesus Christ, the Messiah. Muslims put a greater emphasis on one's living rightly in this life, and on depending upon the mercy of a fairly distant but all-important God. Another major world religion is defined as much by its geography as by its belief and its practices. Hinduism is essentially the religion of the peoples of the subcontinent of India. Hinduism differs fairly substantially from the 3 religions we've already discussed, which are known as monotheistic religions, meaning they believe in one God. Hinduism, on the other hand, allows for the belief in a wide variety of gods or family deities, which can number in the thousands or even hundreds of thousands. Hinduism contains a wide variety of beliefs and individual and local practices, but are united by a common shared mythology and adherence to some sacred writings known as the Vedas and the Upanishads. They also share some common ceremonial rituals and also some common holidays, essentially, across the country. However, unlike the first 3 religions that we discussed of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, there is no defining belief system, rather a more common approach to life and worldview and worship practice. Some of the distinguishing beliefs within Hinduism is generally the belief in karma, that the actions that one takes in life come back and basically reverberate back into one's life and also in the life that one will live to come. Hindus believe generally in reincarnation, that we live a cycle of lives and rebirths, and that the circumstances that one finds oneself in is a result of the consequences of actions taken in previous life. To remedy this, Hinduism generally advocates an upright and moral life, and also advocates for striving towards a liberation or freedom from this cycle of birth and rebirth through meditation and liberating oneself from basically undue desires and coming to enlightenment and deeper understanding about the reality of nature. This religion of Hinduism is more rarely found in the West, but is widely found in the subcontinent of India today, as well as in neighboring countries in East and Southeast Asia. However, it is notoriously difficult to describe because of all its variety, and to my understanding, really has to be experienced more than discussed to fully understand what Hinduism really is all about. The last major religion we'll consider grew out of the Hindu tradition. It began in the years between 600 and 400 before Christ in the person of Siddhartha Gautama, a man living in India who was dissatisfied with life as he found it and also with the religious worldview and practices of his time. He sought to renounce his life to seek greater insight and understanding, and finally, through a series of extreme asceticism and meditation, attained what he understood as enlightenment. He subsequently became known as the Buddha, and his followers became Buddhists. He took up the main principles of Hinduism and pushed them further, especially drawing insight into the nature of reality, that essentially all is illusory or unreal, and that people live in a cycle of living and of death and rebirth, trapped until they are finally freed through deeper enlightenment. They strive to do this by detaching themselves from desires, from immoral behavior, and of allowing oneself into deeper insight into the reality that everything is an illusion that one can free oneself in through deeper understanding. This is achieved primarily through meditative practices, which are extensively employed both by regular people, but also by monastic communities that devote their lives to the writings of important Buddhist thinkers, deriving from the Buddha himself, and also devoting oneself to meditation and reflection in pursuit of this enlightenment, to free them from this cycle of birth and rebirth, enabling them to enter a state called nirvana, which is somewhat comparable to heaven as they understand it. Buddhism is practiced by about 500 million people around the world today, most of whom are in China and other Southeast Asian countries, and has some following in the West, but like Hinduism, really has not taken much of a foothold, while the West is predominantly Christian and partly Jewish and partly Islamic and partly a variety of other smaller religions as well. In addition to the major world religions just described, there are also a variety of less significant but nonetheless important religions that have been practiced throughout history or around the world today. Most notably among these are various folk religions, religions that are particular to certain areas or certain peoples. Some of these include Shinto, or the belief system of the people of Japan, Jainism, Sikhism, Zoroastrianism, Baha'ism. Some regard Mormonism in this vein. There's a wide variety of these practices. And also, when we look back through history, such as Greek mythology or Norse mythology or the spirituality of American Indian peoples, there's around the world and through time a good number of different religious beliefs and religious practices associated with them. So while the world is increasingly becoming a world of major world religions just described, it also must be recognized that there have been in the past, and still are today, practitioners of other smaller localized religions at the same time. Now, one substantial question in considering the existence of these many world religions is, how ought a Christian understand these religions? And how should a Christian relate him or herself to them? Before diving into this very important question, we first must understand that humans at all times and throughout history have found themselves in a mysteriously orderly universe and have noticed moral sensibilities within themselves and have asked questions about where they've come from, where they are going, and what the purpose of this existence is. And in every place, likewise, humans have created stories to explain this reality in which they live and to position themselves in it. They likewise create rituals and practices and ceremonies that help to express these beliefs and further connect themselves with the transcendent realities which they hold to exist. This is a universal human phenomenon, and as far as we understand, has from the very beginning of human existence been in practice. But to answer this question, there may be several approaches that one can take to positioning other world religions relative to Christianity. A first approach may be to hold one religion to be true, with the other religions as false, either being misled or illusioned or simply incorrect. In this mode of thinking, Christianity would be held to be the true revelation of God and the right way of understanding oneself and the world and God and everything, while other world religions, as their beliefs contradict Christianity, are necessarily wrong. This has some good validity to it because world religions do hold differing truth claims that are contradictory, and logically, only one explanation of the world can be true. And in this mode of thinking, the strength of it is that it takes logic and reason seriously in trying to understand one's faith and the faith held by other peoples around the world. A second approach to answering this question is understanding one religion to be the full revelation, while other religions have subsidiary or lesser revelations. In this mode of thought, one would hold Christianity as being the full revelation of God in Jesus Christ, with other religions having some wisdom or some insight, but nonetheless incomplete in relation to the full true reality of Christianity. A third approach is to understand that all religions are essentially equal, that all, though varied in their practice and their expression, serve the same purpose in bringing people to God. This approach is more common in the Western world today, and it has its advantages of having respect for other world religions and some humility towards one's own religion. But it runs into the obvious logical difficulty of having to ultimately determine which of the varying and the conflicting truth claims are indeed true. And a fourth way of approaching this is basically to not answer the question and to say it is so complicated, and that as different religions use such differing concepts, even differing words, and certainly different languages, that these worldviews and religions are essentially like comparing apples and oranges, and that to try to do so logically really doesn't make much sense because they don't equate. My own view is most similar to this second. I find in my faith life, in my prayer and my worship, and hearing the words of Jesus, I find the life and the joy and the peace and the love that he talks about. And so I gladly hold Christianity to be true, as I find it very much true, and it holds up under rigorous intellectual inquiry. However, at the same time, I see in other religions and in practitioners of other religions some wisdom, some goodness, and some insight, even as I hold Christianity to supersede the depth of wisdom and the goodness I find there. So for myself, I relate to people with some respect and kindness, and I can even learn from people who practice other religions, but hold nonetheless very clearly to the truth as far as I can see it, as revealed fully in the person of Jesus Christ and in the church and tradition that's followed after him. regardless of how we evaluate the truth claims of other world religions, we still have, at the same time, to interact with people who hold different faiths or who come from different religious traditions. We as Christians, as followers of Christ, are commanded to do unto others as we would have them do to us. We are encouraged in the Bible to live by the Holy Spirit, to be kind to one another, to be good to each other, and to live with compassion and understanding for other people, regardless of the religious tradition from which they come. Jesus himself, who grew up as a Jew and could plausibly said to be the first Christian, as he himself was the Christ, he also notably lifted up people from other religious traditions, notably the Samaritans. And he was not only kind to them, but he even lifted them up sometimes as examples of proper faith and good living. And so we too, as we do indeed go about sharing the good news of Jesus Christ, we should, when encountering or living with or working alongside people who have different faiths, we should be happy and willing and even eager to share about Jesus, should nonetheless treat people from wherever they come, whatever their background, with goodness, with grace, with peace, and with the same love that Jesus has for each of us. So thank you for joining with us in our survey of world religions and our consideration of how we position these world religions relative to Christianity. And we hope you will join with us in our next week as we follow with one last theological class, that on the sacraments of baptism and communion. So God bless you in your studies this week, and look forward to seeing you again next week at the same time as we study the sacraments.